Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. It is about 10:40 on a Thursday morning. Hope everyone's doing good. It's been a beautiful October. Weather's been just totally spectacular, so I hope everyone's doing good and enjoying this weather. Maybe hopefully everyone has hopefully everyone has some cool plans maybe for Halloween. I'm gonna have some friends over on Halloween, and I think what we're gonna do. It's funny. Halloween's my favorite time of year, and as far as like, I don't really do anything different around Halloween as far as decorating or dressing up. I mean, I kind of have that part. That's all of those things are kind of part of my life anyway. I don't really watch, as far as movie habits go, I don't really change my habits too much around that. The only thing I do that's my yearly ritual that I always do is I always watch Halloween, John Carpenter's original film, or not his original film, but the one of the most iconic slasher movies of all time. That's one thing I do differently. I don't usually watch. Well, I take it back. I have watched them out of season, but I typically always watch Halloween. I always watch that every year, so that's usually a regular ritual. Last year, I got a really amazing. I finally tracked down a really amazing Blu-ray version of Halloween, and I for some reason I had lots of problems finding a really good copy of it, and I finally got it, and it's amazing. So I'm gonna probably have some friends over on Halloween, and we're gonna watch Halloween and then Halloween 2. Get some pizza, and some beer, and I we're gonna watch the originals. And so I might get a couple people over. I had this idea a while ago of doing a Film Fanatic watch show where I was going to basically do a live watch where we watch some films. I think it was last year or maybe even the year before, I was going to do a Freddy vs. Jason Film Fanatic watch party. And I had to cancel it. And I think I had planned on doing it another time, and I had to move it around, and it ended up having to cancel. So I had this idea of doing it for Halloween, but it's kind of late. It's kind of late right now, but we'll see. I think it would be fun to do a watch party, and just, those are two iconic movies. To watch them back to back, I think will be a really fun experience. I also have Halloween 2 on Blu-ray, so it'll be pretty sweet. But anyway, so we'll see. And for me the best way to celebrate Halloween, really. And yeah, as far as other things, today's going to be a pretty different show. Today's going to be basically I'm going to talk about the top horror movies that I've seen this year. This year's been actually a very good year as far as horror movies. Very, I was really surprised, pleasantly surprised. Didn't really see it coming, so that's going to be a fun thing. And for the last few weeks or so, I've been knee deep in watching and reviewing all of the Friday 13th movies. I still have about, I think I still have about, yeah, it's crazy. I still have three more movies to get to in the Friday the 13th series. I finished my box set a few days ago, a few nights ago. And the last one in that series is Jason Takes Manhattan. And that series, or the box set I should say, it was originally Friday the 13th was owned by Paramount Pictures. They basically decided to end the franchise after Jason Takes Manhattan. And then along came the movie company New Line Cinema. They bought the rights to Jason and the Friday the 13th series. So after that transition, they started putting out the other movies. The Jason Goes to Hell, Jason X, and of course the big epic film Jason vs. Freddy. They also put out the reboot that came out, which was the last film. So they really, these movies are pretty different. They're very, especially Jason X and Jason Goes to Hell. So I've been done watching them, and I have some shows. Most of the shows done. I still have to upload and post the videos. A lot of them are recorded. I'm gradually getting to it. I been kind of busy, so I've been. What I try to do is still record the videos every day, and then eventually I'll get to them. So, and it's been a blast. It's been a lot of fun. There's also another movie, it's technically a documentary that I'm going to be covering. Also, that's also included in the Friday the 13th series. It's not a movie; it's a documentary, and it's basically a retrospective of the 30 years of the entire franchise. And it's his name is Jason. I bought this at I think it was at Harbor Auto Video, which was a video store that used to exist. No longer, it's dead. It used to exist in Camden, Maine, and I used to have a membership there, and I used to go there quite a bit. And they had a really good film selection, especially their foreign film selection. Really, really good. And they closed, and I bought a shit ton of movies there. And one of them I bought was this documentary. His name was Jason. Never heard of it before. I definitely hadn't seen it before, so I bought it. Of course, I'm a Friday 13th fanatic, and so it was funny. I finished the last movie the other night, and then I was like, the next day, I wasn't exhausted. I figured I'd be burnt out or exhausted. Like, okay, I'm gonna watch after watching all of these Friday 13th movies. I'm gonna watch something radically different. I need a clean slate. I'm gonna watch a documentary about whales having sex or something. And then surprisingly, I had this craving of like, I want to watch some more Friday 13th movies. And part of me was a little bit sad that it was over. But then I realized I'm kind of a completionist that way. So then I realized, wait, I do have this documentary, and I've seen it a few times. So I cranked that in, and I started watching it. So I'm going to do a series, a show on that also. Why the fuck not? And again, I have done multiple shows on this franchise, so there's at least on this channel, I would say there's probably at least 2 to 3 videos about each of the movies in this entire franchise, and the of the and also the Friday 13th universe itself. So there's a lot, but these movies mean kind of the world to me. They're so entertaining, so ridiculous, and I just love them. It's consistent. So, and movies always, if something resonates with you, I think over time, and then also your state of mind. Everything things shift, and they can mean something differently. You can take something out of it differently. Maybe something you missed, or you have the other part of the spectrum of where maybe it just doesn't hold up, and it feels like, I think it's a little dated, or I've kind of outgrown it or whatever. But for me, with these movies, obviously it's about 80% nostalgia. It's tied to my childhood. But I think these movies actually grow on me. I enjoy them more now than ever. So it's awesome. One other thing that I'm really, really excited about, I'm going to watch it tonight, because again, the same thing happened last night, and I was so aggravated. I wanted to sit down and watch this movie so badly, but I got distracted. I was on my phone. I got calls that I had to kind of take, and I got too distracted with phone calls, and it was later at night, and I was like, "Oh, this is stupid." So by the time I had the time, everything was cleared, I put in this movie, and I was like, "Shit, it's too late." So I'm gonna watch it tonight with no distractions, and that is Lake Mungo. I did a review on this movie a few weeks ago, and this movie is kind of outstanding. I watched it online because I'd heard some really, really good things about it, and then I found it. It's a really, apparently, it's a really, well, it's definitely a movie, and a lot of people don't talk about. It's pretty rare. It's hard to find any information about it. But then I just came across that there's this newly released Blu-ray of this movie that's got all kinds of special features. So I'm super excited. When this movie came out, it came out on DVD. I don't think it even had a theatrical run. It disappeared. I heard that even to find information about the directors or the film creators, you couldn't find anything. So, but there's all kinds of special features on here. There's interviews with the creative team that put out this movie. This is an Australian movie. It's really, really good. I am super excited to sit down and watch this on Blu-ray. So stay tuned for a brand new review on Lake Mungo. This movie is kind of an amazing discovery. And I'm super excited. I got this really beautiful edition of this movie. It's got all these special features. So, yeah, very excited. So, the thing today, what I'm going to be talking about today, which I have never done before actually, is kind of a year in review of the year. We are in 2024. Hard to believe. And today's show is going to be kind of a best of the best horror films that I've seen this year. And I've said in past videos that I've been really kind of disgruntled as far as the state of the movie industry, as far as new movies. I typically watch older films. I collect older films. I always go back to the 60s, and I especially always go back to the 70s, 80s, early 80s to mid 80s. Those 2 decades are hands down my favorite. I am all about the old school, low budget horror exploitation world, and all things exploitation. That's my to go to well that I frequent, that I feel always inspires me. So, but that being said, I always try to stay up on new things that are coming out. I try to see new movies. I still love going to the movie theater. It's like one of my favorite activities. So it might actually be my favorite thing to do when I have the time or I'm free or whatever. Going to see music and then also going to the movies is, just so fun. So, and I probably pick, going to a movie for a really awesome, and amazing theatrical experience. To me, it's almost the best thing to do. So, I've been, really disappointed with a lot of these films that have been coming out. I've been just completely over the whole Marvel movie after movie sequel that keeps coming out, sequels. And I'm a total comic book nerd, but I've been just so overwhelmed with a lot of those things. That being said, I really did like uh, Deadpool and Wolverine. I think that movie was kind of fantastic. I did a show on that movie. But other than that, it had been, or even up until that point, it had been a while since I've been to the movies. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? I used to go to the movies all the time. And there's been just so much stuff coming out that I just feel is just like these, crappy products that are thrown out there. It's like I don't know, so disposable, like a Kentucky Fried Chicken commercial or something. And I just feel like that's been happening so much. Like that's always a thing, but it just seems like there's been all of this regurgitated stuff and lack of originality, lack of something new, lack of something fresh. But when I look back at this year, especially when it comes to horror films, there's been some really good horror films. So I decided, and I've never done this for this channel. I've never done like a best of the year, kind of series. So I decided, why the hell not? And it's funny because I can't think of any films that I've seen outside of horror that I really liked this year, in all honesty, in 2024. Some of the movies I want, maybe, which is now last year, but Killers of the Flower Moon, I really love that movie. But that was technically last year, so I don't know. I can't think of anything, which is kind of fucked up and crazy. I can't think of any other movies outside of the horror genre that were like I thought were I found really exciting and why I want to watch them again. It's that's kind of unprecedented, and I don't think it's because I've changed my habits. I mean, I've kind of always loved horror films, and I've things have shifted for me, but I'm kind of the same person as I've always been. My tastes are kind of the same. Try to always have an open mind. I think that's one quality I have that's pretty good is I have a pretty open mind to things. But that all being said, I've seen some really good horror films. So today's show is going to be on those movies. This isn't in gonna this list. It's not a big list, but it's not going to be really in order per se. I do have a movie I'm going to talk about where I think it's close, but I probably will would go as far as saying it's probably my favorite film, favorite horror new horror film of this year. But that's about it. So the rest of the movies that I'm going to talk about are not really in any particular order. So the first movie I'm going to talk about, which I really loved, I did get a chance to see it in the theater, and that is Maxine. Maxine was the conclusion to the Ty West trilogy. I did a I got to see it in the theater, which was awesome, and I did a review for that film, and I've done a few posts on Maxine. That movie, that was a movie I was really looking forward to. I'm a huge fan of that trilogy. I think Ty West, who was the director, and also Mia Goth, who was the amazing actress in all of these films of these films, and also was heavily involved with the production, produced some of the films, even co-wrote some of the script in some of the films. Really, really hands-on, really involved. I loved X. I think X is an amazing film, and I also think Pearl is just fantastic. The I love how radically one of the things I love about this trilogy is how each movie is so different from each other. So, but yet they are like still at their core. All three movies, I think, still at their core, they're just really kick-ass, modern slasher classics. Everything else around outside of that is very interesting and very original, but at its core, I feel like that's what it's about. And Maxine, I saw it in the theater and I thought it was fantastic. I loved how new it was. I loved it had a real fresh approach. There's many things about that movie that I loved. I've only seen it once. I do want to buy it, but what I want to do first before I buy Maxine is I want to buy all three films. I want to buy X, Pearl, and Maxine all on Blu-ray and watch them in succession. I haven't bought any of those movies yet on Blu-ray. But fantastic movies. One of the best, talk about franchises, I think one of the best modern day franchises that has come upon us in this age. Just fantastic. Um, and it's funny. And I have seen this. I've heard a lot of things, but I've heard a lot of people. Maxine apparently has had a pretty or mixed reaction for a lot of people. I think it did make a lot of money. It was very successful. Again, all of these films are very much low budget, old school kind of filmmaking, especially in the kind of old school, exploitation, giallo vibe, which those films really, or those genres really have a huge influence on these movies, especially Maxine, which I was really surprised about. And I think that was why I love that movie. But this movie also, I think Maxine really had a really, I don't know, polarizing effect on people. I know people who really liked it and people who didn't really like it. And I went to, it was funny, I had a party, or I went to a party this past weekend and I got in this conversation with this guy that I met who was super cool. He was really into horror movies, but we started talking about Maxine and Mia Goth, and he was saying how he was kind of let down and disappointed. He felt like there wasn't enough of a strong character arc by Mia Goth in the film, and that it was kind of underwhelming. And he liked it, but he just felt it wasn't on par with the other films. And I talked to him about it, and I think it's great that people can give their opinions in a smart and articulate way and respectful way. And I told him kind of what I felt. What were those ingredients about the movie that made it that really resonated with me, or and made it a really fantastic experience? It was definitely a movie to see in the theater. And I had said that I felt like I knew kind of what the movie was going to be about. I had said I'm a huge fan of the trilogy, but I was really surprised on how much this movie was inspired by all of the classic giallo Italian horror films, and especially all of the gritty, sleazy horror exploitation movies that came out in the '70s. Like I had said too, I feel like, and I just feel this way. I feel like this movie, Maxine, is kind of a love letter to those kind of sleazy giallo, horror exploitation movies. You just don't see films like that made anymore. And this movie really had that kind of dirty quality to it, which I was really not expecting. I think X definitely has that vibe. X has very much an old school slasher vibe. But this Maxine, I felt, took a step further into having those influences. And I was really impressed with it. I loved, and it had a lot of comedic moments to it, which I thought were great. Mia Goth is fantastic. The Kevin Bacon, I was like, what? Blown away by him. And I had said, I had told this guy that I felt like it's kind of the same thing for me, where, when Quentin Tarantino put out Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which I think is a fantastic movie, awesome movie. I look at that movie as being a love letter to all of Quentin Tarantino's influences, all of his passions when it comes to film, the all of the filmmakers that influence him, all the movies that influence him, and it's a love letter to that entire world of a bygone time era. And I said to him, this guy, I felt like Maxine for me was the same kind of thing. I felt like Maxine is this really beautiful love letter to a bygone time of how horror films used to be made. It's a beautiful love letter to all of the amazing giallo films that came out, all the classic '60s and '70s and '80s films that came out of Italy, and also all of the gritty, sleazy exploitation movies and horror exploitation movies that came out. And I feel like it was a love letter to those decades, of which I love the most. And that's what resonated with me the most. And so I just was like, this is fantastic. Like, how can I not love this? So Maxine was great. I really was impressed with that movie. I really thought it was pretty fantastic. I was I was really blown away by that aspect of it. Really great film. So the next film up that I'm going to talk about, and again, this is not in any particular order, but I do have a movie that I will talk about at the end, that I do feel probably is my favorite. But next up is 2024's Long Legs. and it was directed by Oz Perkins, Anthony Perkins' son from Psycho. Wild. It stars the amazing Nicolas Cage, of course, and also Micah, Mikey, or Micah Monroe, and Alicia Witt. Longlegs. This is a movie I did not. I almost saw it in the theater, but then my plans kind of got screwed up, and I didn't. I did not end up going to see it in the theater, and I saw it on. I rented it on DVD and I watched it that way. I can't wait to get it on Blu-ray. That's a movie. It's definitely a movie that I'm really excited to buy on Blu-ray because it's such a visually immersive film, and I really like this movie. I still think about it. I've only seen it once. I still think about it. It still put out this thing of where it still kind of resonates with me. Going into this film, I heard so many mixed things about Longlegs. I mostly heard really negative things about this movie, saying I knew two or three people. Well, no, I should say I know four people that saw Longlegs in the theater, and they said maybe one or two things about the film that were positive. But for the most part, they just trashed it and just said that it was basically this, kind of overly hype train, and that it was, Longlegs had this incredible campaign for promotion. This Longlegs was actually incredibly successful in the box office. It made a shit ton of money. This, of course, it stars the iconic Nick Cage, one of my favorite all-time actors. But I knew four people that saw it in the theater, and for the most part, overall, they trashed it. They said that the film was really kind of pointless. It was establishing something, but then it just the train ran off the tracks, and it couldn't get back on the tracks. So I went into the movie when I watched it. Again, I try to go into the film pretty objectively or subjectively. Like, you're gonna try to have your own experience. Of course, hearing things or seeing reviews are gonna, to a degree, are gonna influence it. But I'm pretty good at like separating those things, and I usually try to stay away from those things. But so I went into it hearing mostly negative things about it, but I tried to block it out, and I watched it, and I was kind of enchanted by this film. I thought it was kind of an enigma. I thought it was very mysterious. It was the story is pretty straightforward, but where it goes, and I think it does a really good thing of like blending different genres of films together, and it gives it, because of that, I think it has some real heavy duty originality to it. Like, it has this vibe of where it feels very grounded, and it's kind of is really influenced by films like Silence of the Lambs, for instance, which is very grounded. There's not a literal there's no fantasy involved. There is a monster in it with Buffalo Bill, but it's not fantastical. It's grounded, and so the way it's established that way is really unique and really different. And so it does take this radical turn about midway through the film, and suddenly there's like this kind of fantasy fictional horror thread that kind of pulls you in, or that is laid out for you, that you're brought into slowly. And suddenly this film that has this very grounded kind of feel suddenly has a very kind of supernatural vibe to it, or aesthetic to it. So it's very different that way. Like, you don't I can't think of too many films that do that. And it has some surprises, especially around Nicolas Cage's character, who plays Longlegs. He's Nicolas Cage is just extraordinary in this film. He's truly, I really think he's truly fucking terrifying. And I think there are moments in this film that are just so suspenseful and creepy as all hell. And it's so visual. It's got some incredible cinematography. The music is really great. The whole vibe of the film is just like really dark and it's a very slow. The film is very slow paced. It's a slow burn, which I'm a huge fan of. But it works. It works so well because that is tough. You know, it can films can get lost in the mud if they're too slow or they can be boring. This film does a really good job with handling the the relay of information, and I really enjoyed this film. And wish I saw it. I wish I saw it in the theater, but I'm definitely going to buy Longlegs on Blu-ray because again, it's a very visually it's so strong. It's such an immersive film, and it has such atmosphere. Which again, I can watch the shittiest movie on earth, but if it has that atmosphere where it's like you can taste it and I'm drawn into it, 9 times out of 10, I'm gonna really like that movie or really love that movie. I don't require, for something that I feel is good, and what do I know? But I don't require a lot for something to be good or to move me. I kind of I go a lot on, I mean, obviously you got to think about things and you have to like process things mentally. But I really go on my gut and my instinct on how something, that primal reaction. That's kind of what I go by when I'm checking out, you know, going to say an art gallery and seeing paintings seeing someone's work for the first time, or hearing a new band for the first time, seeing a new movie for the first time. I just kind of That's kind of how I react. But really good movie. I was really surprised by it. Um, Kind of don't understand the hate that this movie's gotten, but it is what it is. Very cool movie. So I definitely recommend it, and I'm excited to buy it on Blu-ray. So the next film I'm going to talk about, which I was really surprised by, and again, I went into this movie really cold. I did not get a chance to see it in the theater. It would have been awesome to see this movie in the theater. One of the things about all of these movies, especially these first three that I'm talking about, they have such. All three of these movies have. They're all. What I love about all four of these movies that I'm going to be talking about, as far as the best horror movies that I've seen this year, they are all radically different from each other. Like that's when I think about when I think about just say Maxine and Longlegs. Like they're both horror movies, but they are so radically different, and for what they are, radically original in so many ways. And I've noticed with these films that I'm going to be talking about that the they all have rich atmosphere, but they're all very different, and I love that there's like um, so much variety to it. So the movie that I wish I saw in the theater, and again another movie that I think visually is just completely stunning, is In a Violent Nature. That came out this year. It was directed by Chris Nash, and I went into this movie. I had heard about it, but I didn't hear anything, didn't see or hear anything either good. Didn't see any reviews about this movie. I didn't. I don't even think I heard. I don't think I saw any trailers for this movie. But in some of the, with some of the guys that and girls that I listen to, on YouTube who do horror film reviews, I had heard about this movie through that, but I didn't really check out trailers or look into, what people were thinking or saying about this movie. But I heard about it, and I heard it was like a really good slasher movie, and slasher movies are my all-time favorite. So And I don't think that it's been a while since there's been a good slasher film. I mean, a long time. So they don't make them like they used to. So I was excited to see it, and I rented it on DVD, and I was kind of so surprised. In all honesty, I think I was kind of blown away by this movie. And it's interesting. It's very original. It's like it takes, well, on one hand, it takes this very standard paint by numbers template that we've seen, a billion times. But then it takes that total original, it takes that whole kind of template and tells it in a way that is so unique and so original. So it's very interesting how it takes something that's like kind of standard or traditional, but yet will show it to you in a way that you've never ever experienced before. That was the thing I was so blown away by. And this film is like a lot of people, and since I've seen it, I've seen some reviews and have like seen interviews with Chris Nash, the director, because I really enjoyed this movie. Visually, this movie is stunning. This is a movie I can't wait to buy on Blu-ray because visually it's just gorgeous. The thing that's so interesting about this movie is like at its core, it's literally kind of a ripoff of say Friday 13th. It's really like an old school slasher 101. Like it's completely at its core, at its surface, it's basically that same story, that same template of how you make a good solid original or good solid slasher film. As far as that goes, there's nothing new. There's nothing different about that. It's very straightforward. But the other, and I think this movie has a juxtaposition to it, which I think really, which I think really makes this film uh, super cool. So the thing that's really interesting about this movie is on the, at its core, it's just like super, your super standard slasher trope filled horror film, like paint by numbers. You know, uh, Something we've seen a billion times. But the way this movie is shot and the way the story kind of unravels is so unique and original. The film is all shot from the killer's perspective, which we never see. There's never the case of there's no jump scares. It like totally does away with this whole kind of scenario of like the jump scare. You do see it, but you're seeing a jump scare from the killer's perspective. So the camera is basically on the killer, and you're seeing what he's doing. He's basically on camera or in camera the entire film, and you're seeing like how he's kind of existing and how he's living. The film takes place in this really amazing, gorgeous forest. So you're seeing all of nature. You're getting all of this beautiful imagery, and but that also it falls into where the kills in this movie are just so fucking barbaric. Like they're fucking brutal as fuck. And I love that juxtaposition where it's like a beautiful looking movie, but then the kills are just like fucking horrific. There's one kill in particular in this movie that is like one of the most brutal kills I've ever seen. It kind of reminds me of my favorite slasher movie of all time, Maniac, with the shotgun scene. It kind of has that impact where it's just like, holy fuck, And it's all practical effects. But again, this movie has such atmosphere, and it's taking something we've seen so many times, but it's showing you, it's through a lens of a way of showing that standard story that we've never seen before. And I was like, this is super cool. There's no music in this movie. There's like it's so bare bones and stripped down, and it was I think definitely a very very low budget film, but they did such a great job with visually telling you this, this story in such a an original way. And yeah, I was really blown away by this movie. And I cannot wait to buy this one on Blu-ray. Again, completely different than Maxine and Long Legs. Really great film. I just love the unoriginal aspect, which is like very familiar, but then it's done in a way of where it's completely new and original. Very cool. It's an interesting concept for a movie, which I thought is something I've never seen before, because we've never seen, you know, I own shit tons of slasher films and I watch them constantly, and this one really takes that genre, does something different in the genre, which would be great to see more of. Would be great to see more original, fresh ideas. And this movie I think does take a chance and a risk because there are, it gets away from how we traditionally see these movies and the way we experience these films. Very very cool. So last up for this show, and I have to say is probably overall probably the best movie I've seen this year. Probably not only the best movie that I've seen this year, but probably um, easily the best horror movie I think I've seen this year. And that is The Substance, starring Demi Moore. This movie, it was directed by Corley Forget, or sorry, Corley Forget, and she is a French director. Pardon my bad French. This movie is just completely fucking bonkers. I don't know how else to describe it. It is brutal as all hell. It's a total fucking nightmare. But it's, again, there are so many beautiful shots in this movie. It is it's it's kind of like an odyssey of horror. I think this movie has a huge David Cronenberg uh, vibe. There's also, with the whole body horror thing, like the practical effects in this movie and the horror aspects of the gore in this film is just completely fucking insane. Like, you never see movies like this ever uh, nowadays. And so there is the influences, like, and I love that you can see the influences on this film, but it's not like, it doesn't get in the way, and it doesn't take away from how original this movie is. When I saw it in the theater, and I was just like, Jesus Christ, like, it people were like wincing, and just like you could hear people reacting. I went to the theater to see it with a friend, and there were only a few other people in the theater, and you could hear people like gasping and like kind of grabbing a chair, and just like, oh my God, what the fuck, there were like multiple moments, and there's a lot of comedy in this film. It's actually very funny, and you could hear people laughing, and it was like this, it's like a black comedy too. But the influences I felt that I got from this movie was, it's definitely a body horror, film, very much influenced by, of course, the master David Cronenberg. I see lots of influences from him. I see lots of influences from like Stuart Gordon, who is another amazing director who did films like The Reanimator, copious amounts of gore from Beyond, just these wacky low budget kind of exploitation horror movies that just use all of these insane practical effects. Uh, David Cronenberg, Stuart Gordon, big time I would say are influences on big aspects of this film. There's also I feel, there's a big influence from The Shining in this movie, Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, which is overall my favorite Kubrick film, and Stanley Kubrick being my favorite director of all time. There is a big influence I feel like from that movie on in this movie. It's also, again, it's uh, Dennis Quaid is in this, and he's just completely insane and hilarious. This movie is is a drama. It is a it's science fiction, and it is like also, especially the last half of the movie, it's like super gore, uh, and the gore and the gonzo insane aspects of this film I felt like it was really influenced by the genres I love the most. All of the classic, 70s and 80s horror exploitation movies. A lot of the Italian, directors like Lucio Fulci, or just the real down and dirty horror exploitation movies, like copious amounts of violence and gore, and just nasty. The second half of this movie, I didn't think this movie was going to go into that territory, but to me, it really totally had that vibe. And it's interesting because it's kind of like this. It's so beautifully shot, so beautifully put together, and and it has this like highbrow or art house vibe, and it has like this kind of bigger budget, kind of Hollywood feel to it. But then it just like gets, especially the third act, it just gets totally down and dirty and nasty. So I was like, wow, I didn't expect that. This movie also, I would say, has a huge influence from David Lynch. Mulholland Drive would be one, and two of his films, one of his films, Mulholland Drive, Blue Velvet, and also The Elephant Man. It's crazy. So you take all of those movies, those influences, and put them in this crazy fucking soup and light the soup on fire. That's kind of what you get. But even though you can see those influences, this movie is so fucking original. Like, and I never knew what was going to come next. I was like, there were moments in this movie where I was like, wow, okay, they went there. Where the hell is this going to go? And then it just got ramped up even more. And I was like, holy shit. Like, they just take the movie into the stratosphere. And it's not, this movie is very intense and really is coming at you. But the thing that's really cool, and I had heard one review I had heard about this movie going before I went into it. One critic that I saw said that they really, a critic that I saw on YouTube had said that he really, really thought this movie was great, but he thought that the movie was like kind of unrelenting, and there was no let up, and that it was just like you're getting it was like getting hit by a bulldozer. And it's like, yeah, sometimes you can have that vibe, and it is like purely a visceral experience. Oh, and the other movie I would say this was really, really inspired. That was very inspiring for this film was the director Lars von Trier, the German director, and particularly his movie The Antichrist. That movie is fucking insane. One of the most disturbing movies ever made. That movie has a huge influence and the work of Lars von Trier on this film. I would say that's another influence. So it's like real wild mixture of different influences. So, but again, like I said, I had heard that this movie was really good, but kind of overwhelming, and almost you were kind of maxed out, watching it. So going into it, I was a little worried that it was going to be, because it's a longer movie. It's over 2 hours. I think it's like 2 hours and 10 minutes or something like that. So I was a little concerned that this movie would be overwhelming, and it would take away from the experience. But I have to say, this movie was actually very slow. It had a very slow burn. The first act, leading into the second act, is actually kind of a quiet thing. It takes its time evolving. It's actually very slow. It's kind of a slow burn, and it gets ratcheted up. And once the heat gets turned on, fucking, it's nuts. It's totally nuts. But I felt like there was enough of a build up in the beginning of the movie that by the time all of the insanity was coming your way, I was really invested in the film, and it was, it wasn't like, right away getting hit over the head. It's an intense movie, but I felt like there was enough of a slower introduction that it never felt overwhelming. I never felt exhausted while I was watching this movie. I never checked my watch and been like, okay, I get the point, or Jesus Christ, like how much more, I just was blown away by this movie, and so I can't recommend The Substance enough. Definitely the best movie I've seen of 2024, and also, it was a close tie of any of the other movies I've talked about, leaning towards more Maxine. But I have to say, at the end of the day, The Substance was probably definitely at a higher uh, tier, and it was at a I don't know, it really came to the top, to the surface. Extraordinary movie. I can't recommend it enough. And again, I cannot wait to buy this movie on Blu-ray because it's completely insane. So thanks again, and yeah, please check out any of these movies. It's been a pretty wonderful year in horror. So we'll see you next time. Peace.